In from break, if you'd all grab the rest of your coffee, go ahead and start migrating back into your seats here. We're getting ready to go ahead and bring Travis Wright up on the stage here pretty quickly. So while we're waiting and while we're getting everybody back in their seats, let me make a couple of quick, one logistical announcement and one remote announcement. So logistically, for the folks here that have batteries on laptops that are beginning to get a little bit less than where you need them to be at this point in time, we're going to be setting up a charging station in the back, put a bunch of power cords back there and the rest of it so you can at least put your laptops back there, get them recharged up if you need for that time frame. So that's locally here for our Irving location. Of course, that doesn't impact any of our folks that are on via the web at this point in time. But speaking of our people that are on the web right now, let me go ahead and call out the sleepy crew in Atlanta. All right, the Atlanta user group. Guys, wake up, come on. I didn't send anything down there to Marcus to throw at y'all, but you got to be able to wake up and keep rolling with it. It is no earlier there than it is anywhere else in the rest of the world, okay? All right. So with that said and done, let me go ahead and introduce Mr. Travis Wright here. So let me tell you a couple things about him first. So first off, who he is to the folks that you're seeing here today. So we've got several cloud and data center management MVPs that are in the group here today. Some of them are presenting, some of them are in the audience. We've got a configuration manager MVP in the group and the rest of it. Well, Travis is, if I had a Microsoft boss, he would be my Microsoft boss. He is our product group MVP lead. He's the one who helps coordinate our communication between us and our feedback to the product group and the rest of it. He does an invaluable job associated with that. He has a great history with System Center Operations Manager, rolled from System Center Operations Manager over into Service Manager. And he is now responsible not only for the cloud and data center MVPs, but I understand also server and a couple of other areas now as well. Before we start that, Amelia, do we have a giveaway? What have we got?
Well, we actually have 3 very snazzy Star Wars bobbleheads. So, if your ticket number is 209047. 209047. Anybody? All right. That person just lost their chance at a bobblehead. How about 209052? 209052. Okay. Let's do one more. 209069. 209069. Okay. Well,
yeah,
just launch one?
No, they said who wants one. We'll start with that.
Yeah, who wants one?
Yeah, who really wants one? Raise a hand here. First one I saw.
First 3 people. What do you want to do, Cameron?
Hold on. I'm just going to grab, point to 3 that I saw first. Hold on.
All right.
All right. Hold on one second. And if you would go out to the Catapult booth, I saw you. I saw you, and I saw you were the 3 that I saw. Sorry.
Come grab your bobbleheads.
So go grab your bobbleheads over there or the Catapult
Over
booth?
here. I've got them
right
over
there. So, excellent.
Come on down.
All right.
And Twitter is seeming to be back up, so please get back to tweeting until we break it again. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. So with that, let me go ahead and hand this off to Travis, who's going to take us through the wonderful world of Service Manager and a bunch of other stuff I expect. So, thank you, Travis.
All right. Thank you, Cameron. All right, hello everyone. Glad to be here today at System Center Universe. Had a good time last year at this conference, and let's give a hand to the Catapult team for such an awesome conference. I'm really impressed with what this group of people has done for the last 2 years. They've obviously taken a big step forward from last year to this year, and I really appreciate them. Just to kind of add on to Cameron's description of who I am, I'm the lead program manager for community and MVPs for Server and System Center. And so to see these kinds of community grassroots kind of events happening is great. I'd really love to see so many people coming out here in person as well as all over the world via the simulcast over the web. That's just awesome. So let's just go ahead and dive right into System Center reporting here. I feel like the sessions we've had so far today, they're sort of like a overview level of presentation. This time we're going to go way down into the wormhole of developing and extending Service Manager to do System Center reporting. We're going to go really, really deep. So stay with me here, and hopefully you'll learn a lot as we go along. So today I want to cover off just a quick overview of System Center data warehouse and reporting, just so that everyone is level set on what the capabilities are around the data warehouse and reporting. And then we'll go into modeling the database extensions and the DW extensions in Service Manager. And then we'll go through and actually extend the data warehouse in a demo. And I'll show you how to do some kind of advanced reporting techniques that you'll probably want to use. And we have lots of demos along the way. So I'm going to dive right in. There's no way that I can cover all of the things you need to know about data warehousing and reporting in an hour. So this is just, think of this as just the first session of many that I'll do over the next few months. I'll record them on like Microsoft Virtual Academy or something like that. So think of this as sort of the introduction. And we'll go beyond that over time as we go forward. So just to level set everybody on what is the data warehouse and why do we have it? Okay, the data warehouse is, first of all, an offline data store. So we don't want to have a whole lot of data in our online data store, or in this case, the Service Manager CMDB database, because that'll just clutter up the database and make the performance not very good. So we want to have the data stored offline. We want to have the reports running against that offline store so that we get good performance in our online database because we're not impacting them by running those reports. The data warehouse is our long-term data store. We consistently kind of groom out the data out of the online database so that only the most recent and relevant data is there, so that we have good performance in the online DB. But we do want to keep that data for long-term purposes for reporting, because we want to do trending and that kind of thing over potentially many years. The data warehouse is also designed as a high-volume storage, meaning that we want to be able to bring in data from multiple Service Manager instances potentially. And we're really aggregating data across all of System Center into the Service Manager data warehouse. It is the central data warehouse repository for all of System Center. And the data that's in the data warehouse is optimized in such a way to be consumed by reports. So it's optimized in terms of its structure so that we can quickly query the data out of there for our reports. And then lastly, the data warehouse is an extensible store, meaning that we can go through and we can decide additional types of data that we want to store inside of that data warehouse, and then we can populate that data into there. So let's take a quick look at the data warehouse architecture. There's a lot of databases here, a lot of lines between the databases. So let's just kind of quickly walk through these. The first database that you see in the upper left there is the Operations Manager database. You've got the Service Manager database, you've got the Configuration Manager database. These are, you can think of these as the online databases. Out of the box, we provide connectors from Operations Manager to Service Manager to bring in configuration items. So this is things like computers, websites, databases, all these things that Operations Manager discovers and monitors. And we can also bring alerts into the Service Manager database as incidents. We also provide a connector from Configuration Manager into Service Manager, and that'll bring in your computers, the software on those computers, the updates on those computers, the hardware, mobile devices, and so on, and bring that all into one place in the CMDB. The Service Manager database also can be populated from Virtual Machine Manager, Active Directory, and Orchestrator via connectors that we provide out of the box. We then have a job, a data warehouse job, which extracts data out of that Service Manager database and loads it into the DW staging and config database. And that happens every 5 minutes. We also have connectors that bring data directly from the Operations Manager database and the Configuration Manager database to the DW staging and config database. So in the case of Operations Manager, we bring alerts into the DW staging and config database. And now, going forward, like in System Center 2012 SP1, we're starting to bring performance utilization data into the DW staging and config to drive the chargeback set of capabilities that we have in SP1. So we go and we grab all of the virtual machines that Virtual Machine Manager's managing, and we look at the utilization of the virtual hardware on those, the amount of RAM that's being consumed, disk space, et cetera, and we then drive the chargeback reports from that data. And that's just really the beginning of the types of data that we're going to be bringing from other parts of System Center. On the Config Manager side, we bring software update compliance data and power utilization data into the DW staging and config database. It's also possible to inject data directly into the DW staging and config database through our SDK if you want to bring in some of your own IT data that you have and you want to also bring that into the data warehouse. That data is then picked up out of one side of the DW staging config database and put into the other side. That's the extract DW job that you see there. The next job is the transform job that moves data from the DW staging config database to the DW repository database. And this is a job which will take the data in its kind of native format where it's the model-based data, if you will, and it transforms it into a data format that's optimized for reporting. We then have a series of jobs called the load jobs that will take that data and it'll load it into the data mart databases. So we have one data mart that contains all the service manager data. We have another data mart that contains the ops manager data, and another data mart that contains the config manager data. Then we have another series of jobs that will process that data into cubes and store that in the DW analysis services database. Now, all of these databases can reside on separate SQL Server instances, on separate servers, or they can all run on one SQL Server if you're in like a test environment or a small production deployment. The only caveat to that is that the DW staging config and the DW repository database must be on the same SQL Server instance. Once you have all this data stored in these databases and in your DW analysis database for cubes, you can then start to consume that data. So one way that you can consume that data is using Excel. You can have Excel go directly against the views in the data mart databases, or you can have Excel hook up a pivot table to a cube inside of the DW analysis database. You can also use SQL reporting services. We provide a number of different SQL reporting services reports out of the box. You can create your own. I'll show you how to do that today. And even beyond this, you can use the rest of the Microsoft BI stack to do things like SharePoint Performance Point dashboards or Power View. I mean, this is all just Microsoft's standard BI stack. And so the possibilities are really quite broad in terms of the tool set that you can bring to use on top of this data. So let's take a quick look at the reporting stack. The reporting stack is just Microsoft's standard BI stack. Okay, SQL reporting services, Excel. You can author reports using Report Builder, Business Intelligence Design Studio, Excel. You can use SQL reporting services to schedule and deliver those reports automatically via email or onto a SharePoint document library, onto a file share. You can create what we call linked reports. So a linked report is where you take a particular report, like let's say you're looking at an incident report, and you specify some of the parameters in that report, such as I want to look at all of the incidents where the classification is printing and the time created was from the beginning of the year. And then I save that as a linked report, and I call it something like printing incidents this year. And then I can save that, and it'll go up on the SQL reporting services server, and then anybody can come along and just run that report without having to specify those parameters. And a favorite report is the same exact thing, except that it's saved for me personally, and not everybody else can see it. And the integration that we have with SharePoint just keeps getting better and better over time in the Microsoft BI stack. So you can start to use Performance Point and that kind of thing to be able to visualize the data in more interesting ways. Now, another thing that we've done here is we tried to make the reporting really easy to use in terms of consuming it. So as you go to the report viewer inside of the Service Manager console, you see that we have a custom parameter header there that is designed to be model-driven and has a bunch of custom controls in it that make it easy for you to select parameter values and that kind of thing. Okay, so let's move on. And we'll start with just an overview of the data warehouse and reporting. So if we can switch over to my demo machine here. Okay, so first we're just going to look here at the SQL Server. In my demo environment here, I just have all of my databases running in one SQL Server instance. But you can see here that I've got my Service Manager database. I've got my DW staging and config database, DW repository, DW data mart, CM DW data mart, and the OM DW data mart. So all of these databases are just sitting here running on one SQL Server. Lots of databases. The jobs are running on the data warehouse management server and moving the data around behind the scenes here. So let's switch now to look at the Service Manager console. So reporting is integrated into the Service Manager console. And you can see here that we've got a hierarchy of folders, and this hierarchy of folders exactly replicates what you would find on SQL reporting services. So if we go to our SQL reporting services web interface and drill in here, we will see that we have the exact same folder hierarchy. And then within each folder, we can see that there's a number of different reports. Here's the list of incidents report. If we go over here, we can see the list of incident reports. So if you add a report to SQL reporting services in that folder hierarchy, it'll automatically show up inside of the Service Manager console, and you can run the reports from here. So I'll just show you an example quickly of a report here. So in this particular report, this is the list of incidents report. And you'll see some of the custom parameter headers that I was referring to here. So I can go in and choose classification category. I can choose to only look at printing problems, for example. And then you'll see here, like in status, that this is actually a hierarchy of values. Okay, so this is another example of where the user experience inside of the Service Manager console is improved over what you would see inside of, not sure what's going on there. But the parameter header inside of SQL reporting services is not nearly as rich. You can see that we can actually do things like use relative dates and that kind of thing because we have this custom parameter header up here. Once we define these, then we can run the report and see the results here. Okay, so fairly basic, standard SQL reporting services type of stuff. You can do drill in, all that kind of thing. The other way that you can access the data is by using the cubes. So I can go into the Service Manager console, switch over to the data warehouse workspace, and I can view a list of all the cubes that we provide out of the box. Okay, and we'll just take a quick look at the work items cube. What we allow you to do here is from the Service Manager console, you can actually launch Excel in context to that particular cube. So I'll just click Analyze Cube in Excel. This will launch Excel, drop a pivot table into the Excel workbook, and bring up the pivot table field list over here so that I can start to add data into it. So the first thing you want to do when you do this is you want to pick a measure, which is one of these things that has the sigma sign in front of it, that you want to add into the list here, so into the pivot table. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to start with adding in the incident dim count. Okay, so what this tells me is the number of incidents that I have in the data warehouse. I have a whopping 14 right now. Once I have that, then I can start to slice and dice the data by interesting values. So for example, let's say I wanted to slice this by the incident status. Let's see if we can find that here. So you can see there's lots of different data that we can drop into here. So here I'll just do incident impact. Okay, so I'm just going to add in impact. And you can see that it'll slice all the data for me, and I can see the number of incidents that I have by impact. And I can keep adding values here. Like let's say I wanted to look at it by incident source. I can just keep adding in things here and slice and dice the data. So you can see that I had one high impact console created incident here. Okay. Now, we also have KPIs. So let me scroll back up here to our KPI area. This is a KPI that I added. And I'm just going to expand this out here. And we'll add in the value here. And so we can see this is the number of incidents that were escalated. Okay, so in the low category here, we had 10 incidents that were escalated. In the high impact, we had 1. And then we can actually include in here what our goal is. So our goal is to have 10% of our incidents be escalated. So in this case, this is the count of incidents. This is the percentage of incidents that were escalated. So here you can see within the low category, we had 30% of our incidents were escalated. Our goal is to be at 10% though. And then we can add in our status indicator column. And the status indicator column tells us that in this case, our goal is 10%, but the green level indicator is actually at 30%. So in this particular case, because we have exactly 30, we're good. If we had more than 30%, it would have a yellow or a red indicator. So you can see that you can quickly create KPIs, dashboards, that kind of thing using Excel. You can save these workbooks onto a file share, and they will show up here inside of the Service Manager console underneath the reporting workspace in this analysis library. You can have that file share also be a SharePoint document library if you want, so people can go to the SharePoint document library to access these Excel workbooks. The Excel workbooks can be analyzed offline. If they can connect to the cube, they'll get the most recent data. If they can't, then they have a cache set of data they can work off of, so you can analyze the data on the plane. That's what everybody does, right? You analyze your incident management data on the plane. All right, so let's go back to the slides. Hopefully that just gives you a taste of what you can do around reporting in Service Manager. Okay, now we're going to get into how do we extend the data warehouse. The first thing you have to do is understand data modeling in System Center. We have the exact same data model infrastructure in Operations Manager and Service Manager. So whatever you learn here today about Service Manager also applies to Ops Manager. The first thing you need to know is just a few terms. So the first term is class. A class is a kind of thing that you manage. So example would be like a computer or a user. And it roughly equates to a table in a database. The next thing you need to know is a property. A property is an aspect of that class. So for example, a computer has an operating system version, it has a name, it has an IP address, and so on. And that roughly equates to a column in a table. And then we have a relationship type. A relationship type defines how one class is related to another. So for example, a computer has a primary user. That relates the computer class to the user class. An object is an instance of a class. So for example, mycomputer.contoso.com. That particular computer is an object of the computer class. And the last thing is a relationship. And a relationship is an instance of a relationship type. So for example, the fact that mycomputer.contoso.com is related to Travis Wright, that's a relationship instance, okay? So let's dig in on these a little bit deeper. So a class derives from a base class. That means that the class that you're defining will inherit all of the properties and relationship types that are defined on all of the classes that it derives from. Classes can have 0 to n properties on them, and they can have 0 to n relationship types. I'm going to fly through this stuff. Hopefully some of you already know this. Okay, properties have a data type. They can be, for example, an integer or a string or a list. Properties can be required or not required. You can specify validation rules on them. They can have a default value. And one thing that we're going to especially look at today is the idea of an enumeration or list data type property. And this is a special data type property that's commonly used in Service Manager, which controls the data input for particular properties such that the user has to select from a predefined list of values. So an example here would be the incident classification. We want the user to choose from values such as printing incident, website access, emails down, whatever, some predefined list. We don't want them to type in that kind of thing. We want them to choose from a list so that we can categorize it. Come on. Okay, relationship types. Relationship types have 2 endpoints, the source and the target. So there's a source class and a target class for every relationship type. And you can define the min and max cardinality on each end of the relationship type. So an example here would be work item is assigned to user. The source class is the work item class. The target class is the user class. And then we can define the cardinality. We can say that the max cardinality on the work item end is int32 max, which is a really big number. And the max cardinality on the user side is 1. So that means that any given work item can be assigned to at most 1 user, but any given user can have many work items assigned to him. Okay, so let's take a quick demo of authoring a data model. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here just because I just don't have enough time to talk about all this. But if we could switch over to my demo machine here. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the Service Manager authoring tool. This is a download that you can just grab off of Microsoft.com/downloads. And just like extending Ops Manager, same thing in Service Manager, everything is done via management packs. So this authoring tool helps you author management packs. So I'm just going to create a new management pack here. We'll call this demo MP2. So behind the scenes is creating an XML file for us. And then what we'll do is we'll go to the class browser and we'll search in all of the management packs that are in the library here for the config item class, because that's the class we want to derive from. Okay, so just scroll down here. Here's our configuration item class. So the configuration item class is the base class for basically anything that you manage. So we're just going to hit view, and this will bring up the configuration item class in the context of the system library management pack that it's in. You can see that here. You can see the properties that are defined on it. I right-click on this class, choose extend, indicate that I want to store this in the management pack that we just created. Oh, sorry, not extend. Inherit from this class. Okay, and we'll give our class a name. In this case, we're going to do a demo of managing coffee machines. Okay, and then we can give our class a display name. And we can see that our new class has inherited all of the properties and relationships that are defined at the config item level, such as asset status, config item references, location, notes, et cetera. These are kind of generic properties and relationships, and then we can start to create our own custom properties. So I could add here, for example, a property called serial number. Okay, I'm not going to keep going here, but you get the idea. You just add properties and relationships in the Service Manager authoring tool. You save the management pack, you seal it, you import it into Service Manager, and it extends the database schema to be able to store these additional types of objects, in this case, a coffee machine. Now you can see the management pack XML that's been created here behind the scenes. So this is our new class that's been defined, coffee machine. This is one I've pre-created before, right? So you've got the coffee machine class here. We've got a location property, which is a string, serial number is a string, model is a string, and then we have the manufacturer property, which is an enumeration data type property. And you can see down here, we've got our root enumeration and then some enumeration values. So we've got some different manufacturers called Coffee Masters, Brew Boss, Acme Coffee Company, et cetera. And then we have a filter status property as well. And the filter status has some values here, such as no filter, fresh, and needs replacement. So this is how we extend the data model to be able to store additional types of data in the database. So let's go back to the slides now, and we'll talk about how to extend the data warehouse part of things. So again, with the data warehouse, there's a few concepts that we need to learn. So first of all is that the data warehouse is designed as like a typical data warehouse. This is just like a true data warehouse. And it's designed using a star schema data model. And what that basically means is that we have tables organized in a star, if you will. So you can see over here on the right that we have a fact table, and surrounding it we have some dimension tables. Dimension tables represent classes, and facts represent relationships between those classes, typically. And this new data model makes it easier to consume the data from a reporting perspective, because if you were to try to consume the class model that we have in the Service Manager database and the Operations Manager database, that's pretty complicated. We ship about 500 classes out of the box, and I don't even know how many relationship types. And we flatten that fairly complex model from 500 classes down to about 60 semantic dimensions. So it makes the data much more easily consumable because you're dealing with kind of a flatter hierarchy of data. Okay, so let's talk about each of these concepts in a little bit more detail. I'm wondering if the clicker is still working here. Okay, so just one thing to note is you can have many facts, you can have many dimensions, you can extend the dimensions, and you can have relationships between facts that span across dimensions. So you can get pretty complex in this stuff. You can take the model that we provide out of the box, and you can extend that to add your own dimensions. You can extend the dimensions that we provide out of the box. You can add your own facts. It's all designed to be extensible. So let's talk about a dimension. A dimension is equivalent to a class, and it targets a class. So you can see here on this XML example that I've got that it's got a target attribute on it, and that points to the system work item incident class. And so basically what this means is that I've defined this dimension, and it targets the incident class, and so any object of the incident class will flow in to be an object in the incident dimension in the data warehouse. Now there's one important attribute when you define a dimension that you have to keep in mind, and that's the hierarchy support attribute. The hierarchy support attribute lets you define what type of data should be stored in that dimension. So I have three options. The first option is the exact option. The exact option allows me to specify exactly which properties from the incident class I want to include in the dimension. The include extended class properties allows me to say any property that is added to the incident class I also want to include in the dimension. So I start with all the properties that are defined on incident class out of the box. I'm going to include all of those in the incident dimension. And then if somebody comes along and adds a property to the incident class, that'll also automatically be added into the dimension. The third option is the include derived class properties. And this one's a little trickier. What this basically says is, okay, let's say I have a work item class, and it's the base class for incident, change request, and so on. And then I have a work item dimension. Well, now if somebody comes along and they extend, let's say, the incident class and adds a new property called cost center or something like that, I can choose that I want to include include derived class properties in my dimension. So that way, that new cost center property that was added to the incident dimension, because it's a child of the work item class, will now also be included on the work item dimension. Okay, next thing is outriggers. Outriggers are equivalent to enumerations. Okay, so we were just talking about those enumeration data type properties. An outrigger allows me to store those values in the list as a table in the data warehouse. It's called an outrigger. So when I define an outrigger, I simply point to the property that I want to include, and it goes and grabs all of the list values for that particular property and stores them in the data warehouse so they're available for reporting. And we'll see that here in just a second. Okay, and then there's facts, and there's two different kinds of facts. The first one is a relationship fact. A relationship fact points at a relationship type, and it says, this is now a fact. The fact that an incident is assigned to Bob is a fact, and we're going to store that in the database as a relationship fact. Okay, so when we define a relationship fact, we just simply point at the relationship type. You see that down here where we've got the relationship element, and it points to that relationship type. And it's pretty basic. We point at that fact, and it's now included in the data warehouse, that particular relationship type. The other type of fact that's commonly used is a status duration fact. And so this allows us to keep track of how long a particular object had a property value for like a period of time. So let's say, for example, I have the incident class. It has a property on it called status. Status is an enumeration data type property. It has certain values like active, pending, resolved, closed. And I want to keep track of how long an incident spent in the active status, how long it spent in the resolved status, and so on. I use the incident status duration fact to be able to track that kind of thing. Okay, so we can keep track of that type of thing as a fact as well. Okay, the next thing is now we get into defining cubes. So everything that we've been doing so far is just data warehouse extensions, dimensions, facts, outriggers, et cetera. Now we're going to define a cube. So what normally the way you create a cube is you go into SQL Management Studio and you do a bunch of magic over there on the analysis services side, and it requires a lot of really specialized knowledge how to do that. Well, in our situation, we allow cubes to be done declaratively. So you declare a cube in a management pack in XML, and we'll take care of provisioning that cube. We'll take care of processing data into that cube automatically for you. And as things change in the data model, depending upon how you've defined everything, we'll automatically keep the shape of that cube up to date. And you do all that just by declaring it in this management pack. And this also enables our ISV partners to include cubes in their management packs that they ship for things like asset management, for example. So to define a cube is pretty straightforward. You create a system center cube element and give it a name. That's the first step. And then you Then you define a measure group. And a measure group points at a relationship fact that you've already created. And so when we look at a relationship fact, that's based on a relationship type. We go and we bring in everything that's related to that. So let's say that I had a relationship fact of incident about coffee machine. Well, if I include that relationship fact as a measure group in my cube, I'm going to go and get that fact, the fact of a coffee machine being related to an incident. I'm going to grab the incident dimension. I'm going to grab the coffee machine dimension. I'm going to grab all the outriggers that are related to that. So I'm going to grab, for example, the incident status outrigger and include that in the cube as well. So all that just kind of happens automatically behind the scenes. We traverse over the data model and figure out exactly what needs to be included in the cube just by you pointing us at a particular fact. The next thing is a substitution. A substitution is a little tricky. Okay, a substitution allows you to specify that you want to substitute one dimension for another. So normally, a lot of these relationship types are defined at fairly abstract levels. Like, for example, a work item is related to a config item. Well, that's pretty abstract. At that level, we only have kind of generic, uninteresting properties like a work item title and a work item ID. What you really want is you want to have the more detailed information about the incident impact and urgency and priority and that kind of thing. And so what you can do is you can create a cube that substitutes out dimensions. So I can say, for example, I want to take out the work item dimension. I want to replace it with the incident dimension. And I also want to take out the config item dimension. I want to replace it with the computer dimension. And now I have a cube that has data that is incidents about computers. So I got more specific by using these substitutions. Okay, the next thing is a calculated measure. And here, what we do is we define a measure, which is something that we want to measure in our reports. It's a data point, if you will. And so the example here is the number of incidents that are resolved. Well, what is a resolved incident? A resolved incident you have to calculate, okay? Because it's not just status equals resolved. It also needs to include those incidents which have a status of closed. So it's resolved and closed. So to do this, I create a named measure, or sorry, a named calculation. In a named calculation, I specify a particular new property that I'm going to create called incidents resolved. And it's going to be an int data type property. And then I specify some MDX, which is SQL's kind of language for calculating data. Okay, and in this case, it's just a case when statement. It says if the incident status is resolved or closed, then the value for incident resolved is 1. If it's not, then it's 0. And then the measure is just a sum of that property over the whole table. So every incident would have a value of 1 or 0, depending upon whether it's resolved or not. And then the measure is a sum of that column in the table across the whole table. So I can get a count of the number of incidents that are resolved. And then I can start and slice and dice the data. So I could, for example, come along and I could say, okay, show me the number of incidents that are resolved by classification. And that's where cubes get powerful. Okay, then we have actions. So you can declare actions in Management Pack XML. For now, we only support the drill through action. And what you're basically doing here is you're giving a hint to Microsoft's BI stack, whether it's Excel or SharePoint, how to behave when somebody double clicks on a measure value. So for example, let's say that I had a pivot table in Excel, and I'm looking at the number of incidents that are resolved by classification, and I double click on a cell that has a number in it that says 5. When I double click on that, it'll take me to another worksheet in the workbook, and it'll automatically populate in there the list of incidents that represent that number 5. So I'd see 5 incidents, and I'd see the exact 5 incidents that are the ones that are resolved for that particular classification. So we can declare all of this in Management Pack XML here by indicating which measure group we're targeting and which properties of the dimension we want to include in the drill through table. And that then behaves the same whether you're in Excel or in SharePoint. Okay, and the last thing is a KPI. A KPI is a key performance indicator. So this is something that we really are trying to track and we have a goal to achieve. So the example here is the number of incidents that are meeting an SLA. So we point at a particular measure, in this case, incidents meeting SLA. We specify that our goal is 0.9 or 90%. We want to have 90% of our incidents meet their SLA. We have a green threshold, which can be the same or different than the goal. Typically, it would be the same. And then the yellow threshold would be 0.7. And then we indicate the direction is up, so greater is better. And so, and then we can specify the shapes to use. Okay, so by defining this KPI, you get the experience that we just saw in Excel a few minutes ago where I got the red circle or the green triangle. that indicates how we're tracking towards that particular KPI. And this is all declared in Management Pack XML. Okay, so let's go on now. Let's look at some demos of how I created a solution from top to bottom for managing coffee machines. So we saw the data model earlier where we created the class type, the enumerations for the 2 enumeration data type properties. And now we get into the warehouse part here. Now, we saw earlier the authoring tool. That helped us define the data model because that's a really common thing that people do, so we wanted to make that easy with the authoring tool. There are no tools for data warehouse extension. Nothing. Your tool is Visual Studio, Notepad, whatever your favorite XML editor is. But there is one tip that I can give you, which is to download the Management Pack Schema 2.0 XSD file that is included in the Service Manager Job Aids package. And once you create your management pack and you open it up in here as an XML file, if you go up to the XML menu and you go to schemas, you can indicate that you want to use the Management Pack Schema 2.0 XSD file. You just pull down this little menu here, say use the schema. And when you do that, you will see that you start getting IntelliSense to help you do this. So I can say, for example, dimensions, and then I can type dimension. And it starts giving me hints about what I can do. Okay, so that makes it a lot easier. Definitely recommend doing that. So let's take a look at the management pack I created to manage coffee machines. The first thing we see here is the outriggers section. And I created an outrigger for each of the enumeration data type properties that we had, the coffee machine manufacturer and the coffee machine filter status. To create the outrigger, I just gave it an ID, an accessibility, and then I specify the attribute, give it an ID, and then I specify the property path, which points to the coffee machine class, the filter status property. The next thing I defined is a dimension. A dimension, I gave it an ID, an accessibility. Accessibility is either public or internal, and that basically just indicates whether or not somebody else in a different management pack can reference your management pack object like a dimension or an outrigger effect. And then we indicate the hierarchy support that we talked about earlier here, so I'm including extended class properties, which means that anybody that comes along and extends my coffee machine class and adds a new property, that new property will be included in my dimension here. And then I point it at the target. And the target in this case is the coffee machine class that we saw up above. The next thing I added is a measure. The measure here is the total time in filter status. So this captures how much time a coffee machine spends in each filter status. So over time, I would be able to look at how much time did this coffee machine spend in the no filter status, how long did it spend in the clean filter status, and how long did it spend in the needs to be replaced status. And this measure is populated by this fact down here. So we see that we got the fact, coffee machine filter status duration fact, and this points at the outrigger that we defined above for the filter status. And then it keeps track of the start time and the end time. So over time, it keeps track of how much time it spends in each status. Okay, and then lastly, we have the relationship fact. The relationship fact points to the relationship type of work item about config item. So because coffee machine derives from config item, it picks up the work item about config item relationship type. So I can now relate incidents and change requests and problems and so on to my coffee machines. And I create a relationship fact about that based upon that abstract relationship type. Okay, so that's the data warehouse extensions. Now we can look at the cube management pack. Cubes have to be declared in a separate management pack from the dimensions and facts and that kind of thing that it is based upon. So in this particular management pack, I create the warehouse element, and then there's an extensions element. Inside of that, I declare a cube. Here's my cube. I give it an ID. I indicate my measure groups. In this case, the measure group that I want to include is based on the fact of work item about coffee machine. So what is that going to do? That's going to bring in the incident dimension, the problem the incident dimension, the problem dimension, the change request dimension, all these different work item dimensions, all of the outriggers that are associated with the enumeration data type properties of those dimensions, and it'll bring in the coffee machine dimension and its outriggers. So just by declaring this one line of XML, I'm going to bring in a whole passel of data that can be analyzed inside of this cube. Then I created a few substitutions here. So in this case, I'm substituting in, instead of having the work item dimension, which is a fairly abstract dimension, I want to include the incident dimension, the change request dimension, the problem dimension, and the service request dimension. So I'm bringing in those very specific dimensions so that I get all of the properties on those particular dimensions and not just the abstract level properties defined at the work item level. Then I defined an action. So anytime somebody clicks on a measure that's inside of this measure group, they will drill through to a table that shows the display name, title, created date, resolved date, and priority of the incidents that represent that particular number. Okay? And then I defined a KPI. And the KPI that I defined here is coffee machines that need to have their filter replaced. And our goal is to have less than 10 of those. If we have less than 15, we're doing pretty good. If we have less than 20, we're doing okay. If it's anything more than that, then we're doing bad. And the name calculation that I defined here looks at the filter status property. And if the filter status property is no filter or needs replacement, then we give it a 1 value. If it's otherwise, then we give it a 0. And then we sum it up, just as I was talking about with the incident resolved KPI before. Okay, and then we have a measure, and the measure consumes this named calculation. And you can see that it's a sum type here. Okay, so now we have this measure, which is the number of coffee machines that need to have their filter replaced. And then we can have a KPI around that. So that's really all it takes to define a cube. Then you seal these management packs, you import them into Service Manager. The MP sync job picks up those new management packs, copies them over to the data warehouse, tears apart the management pack XML, looks at what needs to be done, goes out, extends the schema, provisions the cube, and starts populating the cube. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So if I go now back over to SQL, we can see here that we've got the Service Manager database. Now if I scroll down here, we'll see that, first of all, we created a MT_coffee machine table. So we're in the Service Manager database now. This is the class data model table. And you can see the properties that we define, like serial number, model, filter status, et cetera, are all columns on this table. This table was created by importing the management pack. If we go up here now and we take a look, instead of at the Service Manager database, we look at the DW staging and config database, we'll see that there is an inbound schema table called MTV_coffee machine. And you can see that it has the same set of properties on it and more. So this is where the data comes to when it comes out of the Service Manager database and starts coming over to the data warehouse side. Its first stop is in this inbound schema MTV_coffee machine table. So now we'll look at the DW repository database. This is the next stop for the data as it is processed by the transform job. And we can see here that we've got the coffee machine dim. So the transformation takes it from the class data model and populates the dimensional model. So now we've got this dimension here. It's got the properties on it that are defined on the class. And so we can bring that data over into the repository database. The next part of the job picks up the data and loads it into the DW data mart database. And we can see here that we've got a coffee machine dimension, same properties. But then you can also see, like here's an example of the outriggers that we created. So here's my coffee machine filter status outrigger, and here's my coffee machine manufacturer outrigger. And if I select the values out of here, you can start to see, here's all the manufacturers, for example, and here's all the filter statuses. And this all just flowed automatically. I added my enumeration values into my management pack. If I add them into the Service Manager console, it doesn't matter. They all just flow automatically over here to the Service Manager data warehouse databases. And here's my coffee machines. I've got about 100 of them. There's one thing I want you to notice here, which is this first row in the table has a dim key of 0, and all of these values are nulls and zeros all along here. We have to do this when we provision the table. We put in basically a null value row. So we'll see in a minute how we can exclude this null value row out of our report. Or if you want to, you can just go into SQL and delete the row. Okay, so let's take a look now at what this all looks like inside of Service Manager. So if we go back now to the cubes view, we'll pull up the coffee machine cube here. Okay, so here's the coffee machine cube that was created by my management pack. We can see that it's been processed. We can see the measures and dimensions and KPIs that are included in it. Click on Analyze Cube in Excel. Brings up Excel, drops that pivot table in there for me, and I have my fields over here. So let's drop a measure in here. Here's the count of coffee machines. Just as we saw before, we can slice and dice this data. For example, let's say I wanted to slice this by, what is this? This is the coffee machine filter status. Okay? Another kind of cool thing about this is I can just select this data, say insert, pie chart, boom, there we go. All right, so I can quickly create charts and that kind of thing to make my user experience more rich in terms of the visualization of it. I can go in and I can filter down this data so I can look at only certain sets of data and so on. So a very powerful way to do things here. Now, let's also, let's leave this in here. And then you can see up here that we've got our KPI of the count of work items, or count of machines that need to have their filter replaced. Okay, so we can see, not surprisingly, that the filter status fresh has 0 of them that need to have their filter replaced. 42 of them that need to be replaced, and then 26 of them don't have any filter at all. Okay, and then the other thing I'll show you here is we'll add in this work item about coffee machine count. So this is the number of incidents that are related to coffee machines. So maybe it would be more interesting, instead of looking at this by filter status, to look at this by manufacturer. So I could remove this field, and I could add in the manufacturer field. So now I can see that actually all 3 of the incidents that I have are related to Joe Maker coffee machines. Well, that's an indicator maybe to me that I don't want to have Joe Maker supplying my coffee machines anymore, because every incident that I have is about his machine. And here's where you can see the drill-in behavior. So if I double-click on this cell, you can see that it drills in that action, and it shows me the 3 incidents that are behind that number. And then the last thing I'll show you is just the KPI that we created. So we'll go up here and sorry, we already looked at the KPI, right? We did. Okay, so that's an example of what it looks like to consume this cube in Excel after we've defined everything, and you can see some of the behaviors that are driven by the things that we've defined. Now let's look at report authoring. So let's say that we're here inside of the report browser, and we click on Report Builder. This will launch the Report Builder utility that comes with SQL Server. It's a click-once application, so you can run it on any machine just by clicking that button in the browser. And they provide you a wizard out of the box. So we're just going to create a new table-style report that will show us a list of our coffee machines. We're going to create a new data set. We're going to specify a new data source connection. So in this case, we're just going to connect to our SQL.contoso.com SQL server. And we'll select, in this case, the DW Data Mart database. We always want to report off of the DW Data Mart database. Or, if you need to, the Ops Manager or Config Manager Data Mart, but never off of any of the other databases. Okay, we just test this connection real quick. We're good to go. Click Next. And here it allows us to browse the schema and choose exactly what we want to include in our report. So in this case, I'll expand out DBO. and resist the temptation to go to tables. Always use the views for reporting. Okay, that allows us to change the structure of the tables underneath, but keep the views the same. So that way, you sort of future-proof your reporting. So always use the views. So here we've got our list of dimensions. We're going to just choose the coffee machine dimension view. Here's all the properties that includes. Click Next. And we can choose some properties we want to include in our report. So maybe the display name, the manufacturer, the model. Let's do, and serial number. Oops. Okay. And now we can see that we're going to get a tabular report that looks something like this. Click Next. We can choose what color we want to have. Let's do forest. Great. Okay, so there's our report. We run this. Okay, so there we go. Very easy to do. We got a report. Here's a list of all our coffee machines coming out of the database. You can notice here there's this blank row. That's the null row that I was mentioning earlier in SQL. So we can go back to our designer, and we can change the data set to exclude that row. We can just go in here, right-click Query, then we can add in a filter that says, we don't want to include anything where the coffee machine dim key is not 0. Okay, now if we run this report again, it'll exclude that row. You don't see it in there anymore. So you can go in here and you can use the designer to create your report. You can create chart-based reports. It's really pretty flexible. But I do want to point out a couple things. Okay, one is, see this manufacturer table, this column right here? It says coffee machine manufacturer.joemaker. Well, that's the internal name of that enumeration value. We actually don't want to include the internal name because it's kind of ugly, and in some cases it can be a GUID, depending upon how it was created. So we need to show the display name of that, and I'll show you how to do that here in just a second. And secondly is, a lot of people want to be able to show data that's related to other data. So for an example, we might want to take a look at the incidents that are related to coffee machines and see that in one table. So to do that, we can go back to the designer, and we can right-click on the data set. We can go to the query, and it's not really possible to kind of do that in this designer here. This is kind of used for basic scenarios. You can click Edit as Text, and you can go in here and you can actually edit the text inside of here. But this is a really terrible SQL query editor. It doesn't give you any sort of syntax formatting or IntelliSense or anything like that. So I recommend that you use SQL Management Studio to create your T-SQL queries. So let's take a look at some of the data here. Okay, so let's look at, first of all, the coffee machine dim view. We can see the properties that are on here, and I especially want to point out that we have properties on here like display name. We're going to include that in our query. And we've got where is it? So we've got the manufacturer value here. This is what we were showing, is this internal number, right? Or this internal ID. And then we've got our serial number and so on. And you can see that we've got this entity dim key. This is the unique identifier for every object in any dimension. And then you've got the coffee machine dim key, which is a automatically incrementing ID for each coffee machine in this dimension. Okay, we'll see something similar on the work item dim view. You can see here you've got an entity dim key. If we were to scroll over here, you would see a work item dim key as well, right here. Okay. The same thing on incident. Okay, you got all these properties and so on. Incident classification is an outrigger. So you can see here's the incident classification value. But you'll notice that the incident classification value, this is the display name, but it's the display name in English. Okay? And we want to potentially be able to include display names for a different language if English isn't our primary language. So I'll show you how to do that as well. Okay, and then this particular table right here shows us work item about coffee machine view. So this is the relationship of work items to coffee machines. And you can see here that we have the coffee machine dim key ID. So this is the coffee machine dim key, the value that indicates the unique identifier for each coffee machine. And then the work item dim key, which is the unique identifier for a work item. And then the last thing I'll show you here is the display string dimension. I'm just going to select the top 10 values out of here. So for every enumeration value, like for example, this is the low urgency enumeration, we have a display name for each of the 20 some odd languages that we support out of the box. Okay, so if we want to be able to show the display name for something other than English, we're going to need to join into this display string dimension table and bring up that value. So here's a query that I wrote that will get the incident title, incident ID, coffee machine display name, the, what is this, DS, the display string of the classification. Okay, so if I run this query, let's look at the results first. So here's the title of the incident, the ID of the incident, the coffee machine display name of the coffee machine that's related to this incident, and the classification of the incident in the English language. If I change this to Russian and rerun this query, you'll see that it shows другие проблемы, right, which is Russian for other problems. Okay? Now, what we do to get all this data together is we have to join tables, and we join tables based upon the various dimension keys. So you can see here, for example, that I started the incident dimension, and I join in the work item dimension based upon the incident entity dim key equaling the work item work item entity dim key. And then I join in the work item about coffee machine view. So this allows me now to traverse over the relationship of the work item being about a coffee machine. And I join that based on the work item dim key in both tables. And then I include the coffee machine dimension by traversing over that relationship that's stored on the work item about coffee machine view table. And then we can bring in the incident classification, and we bring in the display string dimension as well, so we can pick up that display string value. So this one query teaches you a lot of very important tricks when it comes to reporting about how to traverse across relationships, how to pick up display strings for enumerations and other management pack properties. And hopefully this gives you kind of a good idea of how you can author these custom reports. So let's go back to the slides and wrap up. And as I said, this is really just the beginning. There's going to be a lot of other sessions I'll do on this topic. There are some resources that I provided in the slide deck here that will show you how to do some of the things we talked about here. I created a new TechNet wiki page that points to all the resources we already have out there, like blog posts and things like that, on how to extend the data warehouse. And there's a management pack hacking blog post out there that shows you how to export out our management packs, reverse engineer those to look at how we've created them, and that'll help you figure out how to create your own. And then definitely want to grab the Service Manager Job Aids package that has an architecture diagram in it, it has the data model diagram in it, it has the data warehouse schema diagram in it, it has the management pack schema file, et cetera. So lots of good stuff there. So I realized that this is hard stuff, I know. But it is very powerful. You look at the Microsoft BI stack combined with this data warehousing capability, and the possibilities are really endless as far as what you could do. And really, at the end of the day, it comes down to impressing your boss. If you can come up with a really impressive dashboard that consumes data across all of System Center, you're destined for promotion. So hopefully, you got sort of a good introduction into how to extend the data warehouse. And definitely watch for these sessions I'll be doing over the next few months that go into greater detail on some of these other topics. So thank you very much for coming out today, guys.
Excellent. Thank you, Travis. Good stuff. All right. So a couple things. So first off, logistical, as you seem to see every time I get up here, there's got to be something logistical, I've got to say. The first is good news. Twitter doesn't appear to be broken anymore. So for anybody in this location here, for anybody in our remote locations, we've gotten a couple of questions so far, but I expect there's got to be a lot more out there that we can get in terms of what questions you want to know at the Q&A at the end. We're going to have a panel of, as I may have mentioned, all of the speakers that you're seeing here today. So any follow-up questions you want to have and the rest of it, and a bunch of subject matter experts will be up here joining them. So that will be really a good chance to be able to throw in those questions, and let's see what they can come up with for answers on those. So I also wanted to do a quick shout out here for our sponsors, and also a mention for, again, locally here for the crew in Dallas and Irving and the rest of it. So we've got the vendor booths that are out here right now. They've got some great demonstration capabilities out there right now. Each one of the vendors that you're seeing here has a booth out there. Definitely go take a look at it when you get a few minutes. So a couple of other quick things then. Let's see, I wanted to get a chance to be able to introduce the crew here from Veeam. This is Chris Henley. He's going to be going through a couple of presentations related to backup in Hyper-V and monitoring VMware and Operations Manager. So we've worked at Catapult, we work with them quite a bit around the monitoring space, and I'm really interested to see what they've got on the backup in Hyper-V space. So with no further ado, I'll go ahead and move off and let Chris get set up here.
Thank you. You'll forgive me if I plug into power. There's something about having power to your laptop that seems to make it work much better. So, welcome, and to all of you that are out there joining us in the virtual world, welcome to you as well. I've got members of my team that are actually participating at several of the different locations, and for those of you that are here in person, you'll have to forgive me. I'll make some shout outs to some of them during the course of the presentation, just because we've been kind of talking back and forth this morning, and they've said, hey, we've got some questions, things we want you to talk about during your presentation, and I said, okay. Why in the world would a group from Veeam be at System Center Universe? Well, we're here, frankly, because the world has changed. The old System Center tool set has emerged on the stage of a cloud platform. And it's become the mechanism that we're going to use to manage some of the key components of that cloud operating environment. The old client-server environments of the past just don't work very effectively in the cloud operating platform paradigm of today. So we start thinking about some of those key components of cloud, and we think about scalability, for example. And we talk about System Center with App Controller and how we can easily scale workloads in that virtual environment. And then we talk about storage pools, for example, and we start to think about how we're going to use Windows Server, the underlying server platform, to work with those storage pools and scale disk resources so that they can be handed to our virtual environment. All of the things that you've heard about today, all of the things that we will continue to talk about for the rest of the day around this idea of System Center really all focus right back to virtualization and cloud. Now at Veeam, we make tools for virtualization. And we're going to talk today about two sets of tools. One that I think is very important to all of us, and one that's going to have a fairly specific impact or role, if you will, on those of you who are working with VMware as your virtualization platform. Let's talk about backup and replication first. On the slide in front of you, you can see Veeam makes a tool for backup and replication environments. The tool is simply called Veeam Backup and Replication. We've been building this tool now for several years. It's currently being built in its 7th rendition, 7th version. We've garnered all kinds of different awards from the industry about this particular product. It works only for virtualization. We use a very modern approach to data protection. We aren't looking at trying to back up your old physical disks. That model, like the client-server model, has passed. Now, I know that many of you have physical disk resources, and you'll say, well, gosh, I need to be able to back up that disk. I understand that. However, I also understand very clearly that the way that we're going to move in the future is towards virtualization, not away from it. And so from a tools perspective, Veeam builds tools for virtualization. Now, in the virtualization space, we look at a couple of different platforms. Hyper-V obviously is incredibly important to us. VMware is also important in that virtual environment. We build a tool set, Veeam Backup and Replication, that will actually give you a single pane of glass, monitor, manage, in this case, backup and replicate both platform types inside of the same interface. How do we do that? We actually use a set of tools from the various vendors. Now, on the VMware side, we work directly with VMware. We use their open API set to gain access to the vSphere environment, use an underlying set of technology to make images of those virtual machines, and we do so very, very quickly. In fact, you'll note When we start thinking about backups, you're probably going to run your virtual environment and it's going to have a, I don't know, underlying hypervisor. You fill in the blank. Could be Hyper-V, might be VMware, might even be something else. I can tell you one thing, regardless of the underlying hypervisor, I know what the operating system is that you're going to run on top of that hypervisor. Industry tells us 98% plus is going to be Windows Server. Because of that, we work with Microsoft and we use something called the Hyper-V VSS process. Now, in this case, I'm showing you an example of how things would work with a Hyper-V virtual machine. If you were running a VMware virtual machine, we would still use the Hyper-V VSS, or excuse me, the VSS process, because we want to be able to enumerate the contents of the virtual machine. When I say that, what I mean is, I want to be able to get back individual files from my backup, and I want to do it instantly. As fast as I can find them, get them back. I have to change paradigms from the way that we thought in the past. If I use my old disk-based block backup style system, unfortunately, I get recovery that goes right along with that traditional style of backup. So we change. We use the VSS process, Volume Shadow Copy Services, VSS. Veeam writes something called a VSS requester. We'll use a VSS writer for Hyper-V in the background to write those images. We get very, very fast backup and very, very fast recovery. So much so that we call it instant VM recovery. You can recover the whole virtual machine in, 2 minutes. If you want to go individual files, we start to measure those times in as fast as you can click, which is the way things should be. Let's talk about some changes. All of you are familiar with incremental backup. We've been doing this for years and years and years, and it was incredibly effective at being the least effective method of restore. So in an incremental backup, we make a full backup. We use something called a change block tracking mechanism. Now this is something that is kind of cool, Veeam uses, so that instead of, when it's time for my next backup, instead of me going back to the original virtual machine and saying, okay, what's changed since our last backup, the tracking driver simply monitors block level changes on the virtual machine, and as the changes are made on the VM, we simply write those changes out to a CTP file. That way, when it's time to make my next increment, no big shake, I just write whatever was in the CTP file. That's really cool, but it's about the least effective method when it comes to restore. An old incremental style backup system means that I have to restore the full backup and then each of the individual increments along the way. It's as slow as I could possibly do it. There's got to be a better way. So here's the better way. Technology allows us to do something quite dramatic. I can use the same change block tracking mechanism that I've always used, only this time when I write that incremental file, the incremental backup file, instead of writing the file and saving it separately, what if I wrote the file and then injected it into the backup? Now my most recent backup is a full backup. My restore is the most recent full backup, and it includes the incremental changes. Now I know some of you out there are scratching your head going, that's a really cool idea. I wonder if there's more. And there is. Let me show it to you. So with synthetics, we have a couple of options. I could inject the increment into the full backup if we wanted. We could also do the traditional increment path as well. Some of us like to have individual increments so that I have a point to restore to. And so in this case, we could run a synthetic where we do a full backup, then we do 2 increments, and then we can do something kind of remarkably cool. We all want to have limited access to our virtual machines so that I shouldn't say that, limited overhead on our virtual machines so that they're not doing extra work unnecessarily. We want them to focus on the workload that they're supposed to be shouldering, not on doing something like backup or extraneous process. What if I took the full .vbk, the 2 increments that I've already made, and I just combined them together to make what's called a synthetic full? Now in testing, and you'll all do this, you'll find out that going back and performing an active full backup on that virtual machine versus what I get from the full.vbk plus the increments, there's no difference. So you can choose to go back if you want, do an active full backup on the virtual machine, or you can say, you know what? Let's use what I know about the backups and the backup files, combine them together and build a synthetic full backup. Cool concept. Now when we start thinking about this idea of backup, replication, monitoring, management, as I create a synthetic full backup, simple, straightforward, easy, low overhead on the virtual machine, maximum operational capacity for my environment. Now, some of you are saying, what's the next step? Well, let's show you the next step. What if we switched to this way and innovated a little bit further and said, instead of doing the traditional forward incremental, meaning we make a full backup and then we make increments along the way, what if I reversed the increment process? What if I said, we'll inject the increment into the full backup and then leave a trailing restore point behind, so now I can always have my full backup as the most current version, and I have a trailing set of restore points so that if the day comes, let's say it's patch Tuesday, we apply one of the patches without testing and there happens to be a problem, hey, no big shake, we've done reversed incremental, so we can actually simply go and look at the list and say, take me back to the way things were 2 restore points ago, or 1 restore point ago, and bring that back online very, very quickly. Now, we like this idea of innovating in the virtualization space. We can't just do things the way we've always done them, especially when it comes to a transition to a cloud-based environment from client-server. We have to make sure we innovate to take advantage of the technology that's actually available to us. Now, at Veeam, I know you're saying to yourselves, hey, what does this have to do with System Center? And I promise we're getting there. At Veeam, we build a tool called Veeam Backup Free Edition. It's fast, easy to use, and affordable. Pretty darn powerful, too, for that matter. I'll show you a demonstration of it here in just a couple of minutes. The tool, among other things, allows me to take my running virtual machine, point VMzip at it. Now, you've used WinZip. You know when we talk WinZip, we're taking a group of files, compressing them into an archive. Here we're going to take a group of files called the virtual machine, compress them, deduplicate them, store them as an archive, and we'll do it while the virtual machine is still running. And then give you the capability to recover files from within the virtual machine, files associated with the virtual machine, so maybe you need to recover the XML configuration files or binary files or a snapshot or whatever associated with the VM, or the whole VM itself. Kind of cool concepts. Now we'll extend this even further beyond the traditional VMzip, and I'll show you fast demo of how the process works. When we think about this, let's go back there really quick. When we think about the idea behind VMzip, I'm a huge Hyper-V fan. If you haven't noticed, all of my demos come in Hyper-V format. I think it's the best thing since sliced bread. Love Hyper-V. In a Hyper-V environment, I've got a Hyper-V host. I can load VMzip onto that environment, can run on a virtual machine, physical machine, doesn't matter. We make a backup of the virtual machine, and I can restore full VM files, or guest operating system. I'm a huge fan of innovation. When we talk innovation, one of the cool things that Veeam has done, our development team, looked at an API that Microsoft released for Exchange. And they said, hey, that API would allow us to use the same functionality on an Exchange database from a virtual machine backup that we'd find with a traditional VM file restore. What does that mean to you and I? Well, what it means is this free tool allows us to get instant visibility into a backup of an Exchange database, an EDB file. When a user calls up on the phone and says, hey, I had this email, I accidentally deleted it, I'd like to get it back, instead of the old way of, well, we're going to have to run an Exchange restore in order to do that, we could use a simple tool that made that, or use that API, gain access to the database, peruse the contents of the database using a file explorer, just like Windows Explorer, find the individual file in the mailbox, right-click it and say, put it back in Exchange. Oh, that's kind of cool. Now, we could do that for an individual item, for a mailbox, for an entire database. How easy is it? Let's show you how easy it is. Let's switch over, if we can, to my laptop, and we'll do a brief demonstration for you. I have this drive, my beautiful USB portable. Now, this timer says I've got about 16 minutes remaining, which is, I think, enough time for us to teach you how to do both of these processes. Let's start with the second one first. we're going to go, and I'm going to hit my desktop. And I've got an Exchange database that I backed up here. Just put it on my desktop. It's called Mailbox Database. I'm going to go ahead and double-click that. It's going to open in Veeam Explorer for Microsoft Exchange. Now, it's going to take a minute to do this. Oh, all right. It's going to take a couple of seconds to do this. Once it's open, we're going to set the scenario for you. I work for a company that is called sci-fi.com. Among its members, Buck Rogers, Apollo, Starbuck, C-3PO, Captain Kirk, Darth Vader, etc. Now here's the situation. Chewbacca calls. Chewbacca Wookiee, you'll notice there's his account. Chewbacca calls and he tells the help desk, "I've lost an email." And the help desk says, "What was the email about?" And he said, "I think the subject line was like that." Do you need to hear that again? I hope not. I'm not good at that. My son said, "Dad, don't ever do that again." So we can type in the R's, and apparently there are some mail messages that have that as a subject line. So we could actually go and look at the message, and apparently Chewbacca doesn't know a whole lot else besides that. Not a big deal. Easy to restore from here. I could actually take the individual message, right-click on the message, and then we are going to get a series of different options. So I could save it as a message file, drop it to a desktop, send it back to him. So if I had my local Exchange account, Outlook up, just send it on back. Of course, I could always just click Restore To, and we could drop it right back into the existing Exchange database. Now, we also have other capabilities that are built in here that are just kind of darn cool. So let's look at, let's go Captain Kirk. He's got some fun stuff. Remember, this is a backup that we're looking at. So we're just looking at the contents of a backup file. Haven't restored anything, just enumerated it so that you can see it. There's his calendar, his contacts, deleted items, drafts, inbox, journaling, of course. Everything associated with Captain Kirk's mailbox is available here. Let's go to his actual inbox. And I'm interested in some rumors that I've heard about Captain Kirk. Mr. Spock has reported inappropriate activities from Captain Kirk. We're going to go in and check Mr. Kirk's mailbox because he says, "I don't have anything like that in my mailbox." We'll check the backup, and apparently Captain Kirk and Wilma Deering have been hanging out. That might be a photoshopped image. I don't know. The idea here is simple and straightforward. Not only do we enumerate the actual database itself, but all of its content. So any files associated with those emails are also here. Now, the recovery is exactly the same. So again, it's a matter of simply saying, you know what, let's take Captain Kirk's inbox. We'll right-click it, and we could actually restore even at higher levels. So last time we restored a message. Here, we can actually go and even go to the store level, right? So when we talk about tool sets for backup and recovery operations, I want you to start thinking about them in terms of how do they work in virtualization. You really want a nice, modern data protection scheme. Using the traditional methods that we focused on disk aren't effective now that we're using virtualization. When we think about cloud, virtual machines are the gateway to the cloud environment. We need to consider those as we do all of our operations. Now, Microsoft has been very, very good at this. I don't know if you noticed, but inside of System Center, there's something called System Center Data Protection Manager. Anybody used that before? All right, really, has anybody used this before? I saw 4 hands. Now there are 7. I'm assuming all of you use something to back up your virtual machine environment. Whether you use System Center Data Protection Manager or whether you use Veeam Backup and Replication, please find a great set of tools and protect your data. There are 3 categories that I recommend every time we talk about data protection. Powerful. It has to be able to work and work very effectively. It should be easy to use. I'm going to open Veeam Backup and Replication. Oh, it's already running. Look at that. Left it down in my taskbar. It has to be easy to use. And frankly speaking, it should be an affordable thing because it's a piece of software. It's a software add-on to our environment. Let me give you a fun example of how this works. I'm going to show you the hardest thing to do in a backup world. I'm going to plug in a remote drive, right? I need to be able to take my virtual machine backup, in this case, and move it. So, no problem. Let's go Windows E, make sure that that's, there it is, My Passport. And I've created a little folder location here that is called Backup Files. You can see it. Let's go ahead and go to Hyper-V Manager. We'll make this hard on the tool set. Let's say that we've got a virtual machine. It's a Windows Server 2012 VM, and let's make sure that it's up and running. Here I'm going to come to my Veeam Backup and Replication tool. There's my Windows Server 2012 box. You can see the little green icon. She's up and running. Now for the hard part. I need a backup. I'd like it compressed, deduplicated, and stored here on my little remote USB drive. So I'm going to click Veeam Zip, and I'm going to say Veeam Zip to E2012 Backup. That's it. At this point, I will have to wait. And if tradition holds, this should take somewhere around 7 minutes. It's going to compress at a rate of about 2.5 to 1. So if the virtual machine, in this particular instance, happens to run 8 gigs, we expect it to come out a little less than 4 once it's done. Now, the virtual machine that we're backing up is going to that USB drive, completely portable. We are not exporting this virtual machine. We're making a backup of it. The virtual machine could be restored at any other, in this case, Hyper-V host machine, because it's running on Hyper-V. That's it. Could you do that? Yeah, I'm pretty certain that all of you could take that tool set, walk it out into your environment, use it in minutes. Where do I get it? How much does it cost? If we can transition back over to slides, please. We'll give you some additional info. So when we talk about this idea of backup and replication tool set, I told you it needs to be powerful, easy to use, and it needs to be affordable. People ask me all the time, why do you give away your tools? Well, we have free tools, and then we add additional functionality in the for-cost versions. And our anticipation is you're going to use the free tools and go, wow, that's really cool. I'd like to be able to schedule those jobs. So it's probably worth paying for the for-cost utility. Or I'd like to bundle those jobs of backing up multiple VMs together. That's probably worth paying the license cost for the for-cost utility. If that's not important to you, that's not a problem. Use the free tools. If you'll go out to Veeam's website, veeam.com/free VM backup, or if you just go to veeam.com, you'll see it there on the banner. Download your copy of Veeam Backup and Replication. It's version 6.5 today. I told you we have another version, version 7, on its way. You will love the tool set. I'll give you a couple of things that everybody asks. First, why do I have to register at your website? All of our software, including the trial versions, come with full support. We stand behind it 110%. If you have questions, concerns, complaints, suggestions, need help with something, even if you're running a trial version, please hit our forums, text one of our support techs, pick up the phone. You know, we start the support when our relationship with you begins. We're about customers and we're about performance. Powerful, easy to use, affordable. That's where we want to go. When we talk about this business of virtual machine environments and we talk about backup, it becomes incredibly important to think about backup not just in terms of how fast can I complete the backup, but I really want power when it comes to restore. I want to be able to get files back quickly, like with the Veeam Explorer for Exchange tool. I want to recover that Exchange database as fast as I can find those files, right-click them and say, put the message back in Exchange. I don't want to spend hours or days doing recovery. I want it to happen quickly. Now, if you're using System Center Data Protection Manager, built-in capabilities for the Hyper-V environment, as well as those disk capabilities we talked about in the past. Generally speaking, I find the System Center Data Protection Manager deployments working in those kind of enterprise-style businesses. And oftentimes I'll find Veeam Backup in its free edition working side by side with them. The fact that it interacts and does very well with VMware seems to be a big benefit. It also has the capability to extend my functionality from the VMware environment into System Center, and that's where we're actually going to go next. So we're going to transition. This is my thank you. They gave me 2 time slots, which I was thrilled with. They said, send me slides. We're going to talk about backup, and we're going to talk about a management pack for VMware. We'll task both. I think I'm 5 minutes ahead, which is amazing. Emily's back there thinking, yes, we're going to get to lunch early. All of you are thinking, yes, we're going to get to lunch early. Not to worry. I'll make sure that you. No, I'll make sure you do. So there is a group in Phoenix, Arizona. Justin Ward's out there. He's working with Brian Pavnik. Brian's a good friend of mine and an expert when it comes to working with what we're going to talk about next, the Veeam Management Pack for VMware. Gary and his team are up in Minneapolis. Experts in what we're about to talk about. MP. We've got a team down in Houston. Experts in what we're about to talk about. Veeam Management Pack for VMware. We've got a team in Denver watching and doing the same thing. We've got a team in Austin. Experts in Management Pack for VMware. Why do we care about all of this? I'm going to ask the first and most dangerous question. How many of you have VMware virtual machines? Wow, that's a lot of hands. For those of you that are in our remote locations, I'm assuming you have them as well. VMware has taken a strong position in the hypervisor marketplace. In fact, they pretty much own that marketplace until Hyper-V 2012 came out. I'm going to suffer for that, I'm sure. One of the things that we did at Veeam was said, hey, look, seems to make logical sense that the best monitoring management framework out there is System Center. And there is a problem in that there's somewhat of a missing tool set around gathering information from that VMware environment and then reporting it back in the System Center interface. One of the things that we love about Microsoft in System Center 2012 especially, Microsoft has extended the functional capabilities of System Center to natively support VMware. So I can use System Center Virtual Machine Manager, get native support for my VMware virtual machines. That's incredibly effective. Huge value in the product. I can extend the capabilities of System Center to manage my VMware environment. The problem is there's nothing to gather the information about the VMware environment. I have to know what I need to do in order to use System Center to then go and actually do it. Now, I'm going to tout Veeam for just a minute here. It is no secret. Many of you know I worked for Microsoft for about 9 years until 12 months ago when the opportunity came to go to work for Veeam. And friends, coworkers, and colleagues have said, why make the transition? You love Microsoft, and I do. I still do. I'm still writing Windows Server 2012 books. I still love Hyper-V. That hasn't changed. Why Veeam? Well, because Veeam makes the best virtualization tools. And I know that virtualization becomes the gateway to cloud, and I'm positive that cloud is the future of our industry. It's not a guess. So it's a nice strategic move for me, and it's been a great experience. One of the neat things that happened at Worldwide Partner Conference this year, Veeam was given the award Microsoft Partner of the Year for the management and virtualization space. Wow, what a compliment. Incredibly nice. I think a lot of it has to do with what we're about to talk about. So you already know that Veeam makes products for virtualized data protection. I've shown you some of the Veeam backup and replication toolset. You know about the Veeam Explorer for Exchange. I'm supposed to drop you a hint, so here we go. Wouldn't it be cool if there was a Veeam Explorer for SharePoint? That's as hinty as I get. We also make tools that work on the virtualization management side. So when we talk about virtualization management, managing infrastructure from a virtual perspective is incredibly important to us. Now, our anticipation is the best management framework that's out there is System Center. No question, bar none. It's not a point solution. And when I say that, do you know what I mean? We're not taking a piece of software to monitor or manage a single operating piece of my network. System Center is awesome because the underlying framework allows me to manage effectively everything in that environment. I can use System Center Operations Manager, for example, to gather information about everything from the underlying physical hardware all the way up through the individual applications. End-to-end monitoring and management. It's not a point solution. I'm not talking about a tool that I'm going to have to purchase to go out and monitor just a VMware virtual machine. Those point solutions, we end up stacking them up together and they become unruly and very complex. It makes much better sense to just go with System Center. Now I've got an underlying monitoring management framework and I can build on top of that. So Veeam has this idea. Well, it's not Veeam's idea. We simply support it. 2013 being called the year of multi-hypervisor. And it's all about coexistence. Microsoft has helped with this situation immensely by providing native support for VMware. So whether you're running Hyper-V or VMware, we don't really care. Well, I do because I love Hyper-V. But from a System Center perspective, choose the one that you like best. System Center belongs in the middle as the monitoring management framework. Now, when we think about monitoring management frameworks, System Center Operations Manager is the place where Veeam is going to fit. So if we were to look at something like System Center Virtual Machine Manager, Microsoft already has built-in native integration for both Hyper-V and VMware. When we go to Ops Manager means I'm adding management packs to Operations Manager to gather info or make actionable the information that I gather in Ops Manager. There isn't anything natively included for VMware there. And so we use Veeam's management pack, we install it, configure it with Operations Manager, and we gather an amazing amount of data from our VMware virtual environment. So VMware and Ops Manager integration, how exactly does it work? What exactly does it do? Well, we actually use VMware's recommendations, and we use something called a SIM-SMASH database. So VMware vSphere collects data about hardware, hypervisor, operating system, applications. That information stored in a database, SIM-SMASH database, we draw that information out and we report that information. Now, we'll actually install something called collectors. We don't install agents on the VMware side. One of the things VMware has told us over and over and over again, we don't want agents installed in our virtual machines. It means management headache for you, and it means operational headache for the virtual machine. So when you install the Veeam management pack for Ops Manager, we simply use the existing Operations Manager hooks to manage the VMs. We don't install anything on the virtual machines. System Center already has its own capability for management. We just make use of those. By snuggling nicely in between those two, we get some really dramatic opportunities in terms of the way we view data, the way we collect data, and then the way that we execute on the information that we collect. Now, you'll notice from a scale perspective, this solution will scale from the very, very small environment to the very, very huge environment. It's all centrally managed, and there is built-in fault tolerance to the setup. So we use this concept of a collector, and we simply add collectors as you need. So collectors are going to gather data from the databases on the vCenter servers. That data is then going to be reported up to System Center Operations Manager, where you will view it. Now let's say, for instance, that we've got a pair of vCenter servers, and they're reporting information to a single collector, and that collector happens to fail. Not a problem. Built-in fault tolerance with high availability, the workloads will simply fail over to our associated other collectors, and we'll continue operations. Cool concept and easy for us to work. There's this small company called GameStop. Huge kudos to Brian in Phoenix again. Shout out to him. He's the one who taught me about this company. So GameStop, small video game retailer, a couple of outlets around the world. GameStop's got a problem. They've got a VMware environment, thousands of virtual machines. They're using System Center. Their process for working through challenges with VMware virtual machines is very reactive, meaning they get a call, virtual machine's down. Then we have to figure out why it's down and get it back online. It's not the right way to work through challenges associated with virtual machines. We want to be proactive. We want to see what's going to happen, do something about it before it happens so that we don't ever get the phone call that the virtual machine's workload is no longer being supported. So GameStop implements Veeam Management Pack for System Center Operations Manager. We start to hear comments coming back from them. They start to say, wow, there's like 500 built-in alert thresholds already in place here. We installed them, and we start seeing stuff come back about our VMware environment that we didn't know was actually happening. And we start planning for processes, solutions to problems that are now recognizable before they occur instead of after they happened. We love System Center for this. Let me give you some fast examples. Now, you'll have to forgive me. I recorded this so that I can talk to you, and it gives you all of the info at the same time. When you look at this, I told you we want hardware to application level support. Here's the System Center Operations Manager interface. I'm going to start drilling down. Here's one of my data centers. Here's a storage pool. I can look at, remember, processor, memory, network, and disk, the underlying hardware infrastructure. I can see problems. The traditional red, green, yellow interface that you're all familiar with is easy to access and use here. I can scroll and look at individual sensors. So for example, I might want to know what the particular operating capacity of an individual fan is on the underlying host for one of my virtual machines. So the level of detail is exceptional. I can also go to the virtual machine level. So remember, this is a virtual machine that's running in VMware. This one happens to run Windows Server, of course. I've got this one running a SharePoint server, and for some reason my users are complaining that they can't get access to this SharePoint server. I'll scroll down, I'll look inside, we'll look at IIS for a second, and apparently there's a problem with my default website. I could actually right-click and get information about this particular alert, summary, configuration, causes, and did you notice, resolutions. Now you all just watched that demonstration. You didn't even smile. Because in the back of your mind you're thinking, well yeah, isn't that how it's supposed to work? The problem is that if you're not using Management Pack for VMware, it doesn't work that way. You'd have to go out and use, by my count, 6 different tool sets, open in different windows, and be smart enough to integrate the workflow in your own mind, which is awesome if you can do it. But we didn't even talk about cost yet, right? All of those tools are for-cost utilities except for the IIS manager. So our expectation, this powerful, easy-to-use, affordable expectation that we've talked about, comes about as we start talking about working with Veeam Management Pack for VMware. So let's go ahead and play through this one as well. I told you one of the things that we love about working with the Veeam Management Pack for VMware is that as I work through, I have a really strong knowledge base of information. The alerts and the reports that are generated have limited value if I can't actually make them executable. And so when I look at Veeam Management Pack for VMware, we build in a very detailed and fantastic knowledge base. All of the info can actually be gathered directly. You'll notice that we put counter info directly into the knowledge base. I can get summary information, I get causal information, I report back that information from local database, also external. In this case, we can actually go out and look at knowledge base articles published direct on the VMware knowledge base. We integrate all of that into the single interface. The idea is if you're using Ops Manager, why move out and use another set of tools? It should all happen inside of that single pane of glass, and does. Now, because we're gathering all of this information, it makes total sense for us to take that information and start reporting against that information. As you look at this demonstration, you'll notice one of the things that we do, we have a series of built-in reports. You can also customize your own reports, of course, build them out however you'd like. One of the reports that we hear back consistently that our customers love is this one. It's called a Wright sizing report. And what it does is we'll go out and we'll specify a specific length of time that we want to measure. In this case, let's look at the last month. And I want to go out and show me the resources that are allocated from a CPU perspective to my virtual machines. Then I want you to show me how much CPU resources they actually used. And I want to be able to see how many virtual CPUs I could reclaim against how many are actually allocated. Do you see the value? The cost associated with running virtual machines, the functional cost, in some cases, especially when we talk about memory and CPU, those costs can be directly recuperated using something as simple as that Wright sizing report. Now, some of you are out there thinking and scratching your head, goodness gracious, if I could run a Wright sizing report like this one, get information about the allocations or over-allocations of resources, I could go out and recover those and reallocate them to somewhere else. I wonder if I could automate a process like that. Well, sure you could. I think it's called Service Manager, right? Take an alert, respond to the alert. I could actually use another tool called Orchestrator. I could actually build out a workflow of what happens if. I've actually seen some great demos. Charles Clark out of Australia, Stephen Duckert out of Belgium, some really cool demonstrations about using those tools, taking what we get from a report or from an alert, and then kicking off a workload functionality all through System Center to automate the process of recovering virtual machines, for example. It helps an IT professional sleep better at night. One last concept. One of the things that we love about working with the vManagement Pack is that the information can easily be exported to other venues. So in this case, we could take SharePoint, for example, use the System Center component, a web part, that plugs into SharePoint, build our own dashboard views of info from the vManagement Pack, drop them in here. Now when my help desk guys come in, I've got a customized dashboard view that we've built out so that they can easily see exactly what's going on with the virtual machines in the environment. What's really nice is that this extends their functional capabilities to home. If I can have them access this information via a browser on the web, they can now sit on their couch, watch the Super Bowl, pull up the dashboard view in SharePoint, and make sure that everything in our virtual machine world is running just fine. Now, the only challenge with working with SharePoint, obviously, is that it's not System Center. SharePoint doesn't have the management hooks built in to go in and manage my virtual environment. So if I wanted to make a change, I'd actually need to get back to my System Center Operations Manager console and make the changes from there. You can see the level of detail is exceptional. The information that's displayed, of course, is customizable. You can add dashboard views as you see fit. Incredibly powerful tool set and a very valuable solution. So at this point, people ask the same questions. So I like this idea of vManagement Pack for VMware. Does anybody use it? Yeah, we've got 800 enterprise-sized customers, big customers, large businesses that already have this in place in large-scale deployment. Proven very effective for them. I gave you the GameStop example. You can find literally hundreds more. Easy to configure, easy to get into your environment, and as you saw, pre-configured, so all of the reporting and alerting functionality is something that you can simply take advantage of right away. Next question is it actually certified by VMware? It is. I told you we work side by side with VMware to produce products that are certified by them. So yes, VMware ready product comes with built-in certification from them. Also Microsoft Pinpoint product, certified on both sides. Support for VMware all the way back to vSphere 3. 4, I apologize for the yellow, I know that's not highly visible. Current version support as well. 5.0 versions of VMware as well as System Center 20, Microsoft's Windows Server 2012 with SP1. So current version support. Now, one more thing. I told you that I love Microsoft, and here's another good reason why. One of the things that we've done, we've partnered with Microsoft and said, look, we've got a lot of people out there who are running VMware in their environments. They're running System Center in their environment, and we need a way for them to get access to this resource utility, put it into their environment in operation, not just in a test lab, because it's pretty tough to do straight tests on something like a management pack. You need to know what your real world work is going to be like. And so Microsoft and Veeam now offer something called the free management pack 10-pack, meaning you get 10 free sockets of Veeam Management Pack. Veeam licenses all their products on a per socket basis on the host machines where they operate. So per CPU host box. If you happen to be in an environment where you have 40 CPU sockets and you want to use Veeam Management Pack in conjunction with System Center, you fill out a short form on our website. We approve you, you get 10 free sockets. That means you buy 10 less than you would have. It's a value to us because, again, just like the free versions of backup and replication, you get them into your environment, you get to use them, you get to experience them. If they have value for them, we know you're going to go out and buy the rest of the sockets. If they don't have value for you, keep the free 10 and enjoy. I feel like I'm sometimes doing a Ginsu knife commercial when I get to that point. That really is the way that we feel about it. I've told you before, Veeam stands behind our products just 110%. Now, we want to be able to realize the promise of virtualization with Veeam. We talked about virtualization as the gateway to the cloud. It's not going to go away. It's going to become more prevalent. System Center, that underlying platform to monitor, manage, operate those virtual environments in conjunction with something like the Veeam Management Pack, will allow you to do the things that you see on the slide. This is beyond just marketing. It does improve your business continuity. I don't have virtual machines that drop without my knowing. I'm not playing the quickly reply and make things work. Instead, I'm seeing things happening, anticipating them, and preventing them. It improves your scalability. It will reduce your storage costs. Compression and deduplication alone will do that. It reduces your management overhead. And last but not least, the thing that's, I think, most important, our goal as IT professionals when it comes to System Center is uptime in our network. When we start using things like System Center, the Ops Manager toolset, the Veeam Management Pack toolset, the backup and replication tools, what we're really doing is just extending the uptime functionality of our network. It makes all of us look better. As we said earlier, I'm going to be here for the rest of the afternoon. If you have questions, snag or grab me in the hall. For those of you that are out in our online audience, you can contact me at chris.henley@veeam.com. I'm more than happy to take questions from an online perspective as well. You can also, of course, find me on Twitter. @nerdylike_that is my handle. My pleasure speaking with you today. Have a fantastic rest of your afternoon and enjoy your lunch. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chris. So first off, Veeam is our lunch sponsor today. Lunch is here. It is on the 3rd floor. So I'd recommend there's multiple places you could eat lunch. If you want, feel free to go to the 3rd floor and stay there for lunch, or hang out here, or hang out in the vendor area and get a chance to be able to talk with some of the various sponsors and group out there. Now, we are reconvening about 1:25. So we do have a giveaway at that point in time. I will tell you ahead of time, it is probably not a bobblehead. So we're going to roll with that as not a bobblehead is probably the giveaway. I've also got back and forth in terms of are we discussing or are we revealing the location of Universe 2014 or not? I'm not really sure yet. So we'll find out. And I've got a great story they need to tell you about your next speaker, Martin Hoot. So I'll see everybody at 1:25.
Every day has been the same old thing on my block. You either working or you're slanging on my block.